on a newscast. At the 77th UN General Assembly, President Yoon delivered a keynote address. He emphasized the need to protect freedom and uphold global solidarity. Efforts to get the U.S. to take action regarding the Inflation Reduction Act continue. Seoul's Vice Foreign Minister held talks with officials in the states. They vowed to review options and agreed to continue close consultation. President Vladimir Putin ordered Russia's first mobilization since World War II, vowing to respond with the might of all its arsenal if the West continues what he calls nuclear blackmail. This marks the biggest escalation of tensions in Ukraine since Russia's invasion began. Hello and welcome to our newscast. I'm Daniel Che, here to bring the latest. Let's begin with our top story. The first fully in-person UN General Assembly since the pandemic and Russia's invasion of Ukraine is held. In his first speech at the venue, President Yoon emphasized the need to protect freedom and uphold global solidarity. Moon Ganyang starts us off.
Freedom was the overriding theme in South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol's maiden speech at the United Nations as he raised the alarm saying freedom is in jeopardy around the world. Standing before the representatives of the 193-member global body, President Yoon urged the global community to stand together and defend the freedom of people across the world.
진정한 자유와 평화는 질병과 기아로부터의 자유, 문맹으로부터의 자유, 에너지와 문화의 결핍으로부터의 자유를 통해 실현될 수 있습니다.
Closing the education gap and fighting infectious diseases, the South Korean leader stressed, requires wealthy nations to share their advanced technologies and innovations with developing countries. And South Korea will not shy away from its due responsibility as a responsible member of the international community. To that end, Yoon pledged $300 million towards the Access to COVID-19 Tools Accelerator, a global initiative to accelerate the development, production, and equitable access to new COVID-19 therapeutics and vaccines, vowed to up its contribution to the global fund to fight against infectious diseases including AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, and promised to continue to widely share its advanced digital technology and data and spare no effort in providing support and investing education. Yoon, who was elected earlier this year, acknowledged the threat to humanity posed by nuclear weapons and other WMDs, but made no reference to the threat on South Korea's own doorstep, North Korea. Closing out his 15-minute-long speech, President Yoon made note of the UN's very first mission.
대한민국을 한반도의 유일한 합법 정부로 승인하고 유엔군을 파견하여 대한민국의 자유를 수호한 것이었습니다. 대한민국은 세계 시민의 자유 수호와 확대 그리고 평화와 번영을 위해 유엔과 함께 책임을 다하겠습니다.
Freedom, solidarity, and an increased role by South Korea in maintaining international peace and security. In his UN debut address, President Yoon presented South Korea as one of the world's solution providers to the myriad of challenges facing the world today. And although not mentioned by name, a firm message to North Korea as well. Now, whether that will resonate with the international community, we'll find out in the next few days, weeks, and months to come. Moon Ganyang, Arirang News, New York.
And on the sidelines of the event, President Yoon sat down with the UN Secretary General. The duo touched on the threats to peace and stability posed by North Korea. Yoon Jung-min shares with us what was discussed.
The South Korean leader's first UN address did not contain a direct message to North Korea, but meeting UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres after the speech, President Yoon Suk-yeol sent a clear message over the regime's growing nuclear threats.
President Yoon asked the Secretary General to continue his support for a stern response by the international community with one voice in the case of a resumption in nuclear tests or additional nuclear provocations by North Korea. Secretary General Guterres vowed for a clear response by the UN Security Council.
Ensuring South Korea's financial support, Yoon said he believes there will also be financial assistance and investment by the international community toward Pyongyang should it choose a path to openness. The message also echoed during his lunch meeting in New York with former president of the World Bank, Jim Yong Kim. President Yoon added that the history of the Republic of Korea runs parallel to that of the United Nations since its foundation, referring to his earlier speech where he mentioned the UN's mission over 7 decades ago, the approval of the South as the sole legitimate government on the peninsula, and its dedication for peace during the Korean War.
President Yoon said the Republic of Korea is where it is today thanks to such efforts. He promised South Korea will fulfill its responsibility and cooperate with the UN to defend the freedom of the world.
The meeting lasted for about 30 minutes as part of President Yoon's summit diplomacy on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, which is also likely to involve one-on-ones with the leaders of the US and Japan. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
South Korea continues diplomatic efforts to address how the Inflation Reduction Act puts local car makers at a significant disadvantage. Over in New York, Seoul's Vice Foreign Minister held talks on the issue and relayed these concerns to senior American officials. Min Suk-hyun brings the updates.
Seoul's second Vice Foreign Minister Lee Do-hoon on Tuesday met with the U.S. Under-Secretary of State Jose Fernandez on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York. Their meeting came as Seoul seeks to relay its concerns to the U.S. over a new law that excludes electric vehicles assembled outside of North America from tax incentives. During their talks, while Vice Minister Lee proposed various ideas to minimize the impact on South Korean automakers, Fernandez said that the U.S. government was looking into all possible options and agreed to continue close consultation. In a press release, the U.S. State Department said that Fernandez reiterated the country's commitment to maintaining open channels of engagement with South Korea on its Inflation Reduction Act. The two also discussed ways to address other key challenges, such as strengthening global supply chains, combating climate change, and boosting cooperation in the Indo-Pacific. On the same day, Vice Minister Lee also met with the top U.S. diplomat for East Asia policy, Daniel Crittenbrink, and exchanged views on various regional and global issues. Crittenbrink said Seoul's concerns over the Inflation Reduction Act were taken very seriously and added that he was ready to work closely with South Korea to find a solution. Second Vice Foreign Minister Lee Do-hoon is expected to continue with Seoul's diplomatic efforts to resolve the issue while meeting with key officials from the U.S. National Security Council and the National Economic Council in Washington this week. Min Suk-hyun, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories now, the consumer incentives provided by the Inflation Reduction Act could mean EVs account for a majority of passenger vehicles sold in the U.S. by the year 2030. Bloomberg NEF forecast a point-of-sale tax credit of up to $7,500 for a new EV purchase is likely to accelerate the rate of adoption. As a proportion of all car sales in the states last year, the green cars accounted for just 5%, which is less than the global average of 9%. But Bloomberg anticipates a rise to 23% in 2025 and 52% by the year 2030. The U.S. Federal Reserve is expected to announce another big rate hike. With inflation remaining higher than expected, the Fed is on track to go for a 75 basis point spike for the third consecutive time. Choi Min-jung helps us look beyond the digits.
Fed policymakers began their two-day Federal Open Market Committee meeting on Tuesday, and watchers are confident the Fed will raise its benchmark interest rate by at least another 75 basis points. This is widely expected as inflation in August was still higher than expected. But as the world awaits the Fed's decision, South Korea is under growing pressure. Currently, interest rates in South Korea and the U.S. are the same at 2.5%. However, the interest rate in the U.S. is set to pass South Korea's. With any gap potentially having a negative impact, one expert says the country must consider raising its rate by a minimum of 50 basis points.
The Bank of Korea, I think, has to raise the rates faster than previously expected because the Korean won is losing value so quickly. But while I think that keeping the depreciation of the won, making it a bit slower is probably the most important monetary policy goal that you have right now.
And there will be consequences if interest rates keep going up.
If the interest rate do go up higher than expected, it will definitely affect Korean domestic demand, less consumption, less investment, more hardship for people who borrowed money on variable interest rates so that their interest burden payments go up.
This is not only something for South Korea to worry about. Central banks across the world have simultaneously raised interest rates to tackle soaring inflation, with around 90 central banks hiking rates so far this year. The World Bank has warned that if this continues, there could be a global recession in 2023. The European Central Bank raised rates by an unprecedented 75 basis points earlier this month too, and it is widely expected that the Bank of England will unveil a big rate hike this week as well. The president of the World Bank Group cautioned that global growth is already slowing sharply and that further slowing is likely as more countries fall into recession. Choi Min-dong, Arirang News.
For the first time in a quarter century, South Korea is on course to post a trade deficit for 6 straight months. In September alone so far, exports have gone down on year while imports soared. Here's Jung with a breakdown of the numbers.
For the first time in 25 years, South Korea's balance of trade this month could be in the red for a 6th month in a row. The Korea Customs Service reported on Wednesday that the country's trade deficit, the difference between exports and imports, for the first 20 days of September amounted to $4.1 billion. Exports during the same period came to just under $33 billion, down 8.7% compared to the same period a year earlier. The fall was led by steel products, which were down nearly 32%, and automobiles down by 7.5%. Also, outbound shipments to Korea's biggest trading partner, China, fell 14%. The agency attributed the decline to fewer operating days due to the Thanksgiving holiday Chuseok, which fell this year in early September. Finance Minister Chu Kyung-woo said the government will closely monitor risk and do all it can to address the trade deficit.
To boost exports, this year's financial support for trade will be expanded to 351 trillion won, which is 90 trillion won more than what was planned early this year.
He added that the government will inject around $9 million of reserve funds into reducing logistics costs for exporters. However, imports in the first 20 days of this month came to roughly $37 billion, climbing more than 6% on year. The rise was driven by soaring global energy prices, with gas skyrocketing by more than 106%, crude oil up by 16%, and coal by nearly 13%. An expert says South Korea is likely to post trade deficits for a while.
The growth rate of imports are way above and higher than the growth rate of exports. And that, I think, is going to be the real reason for continued trade deficit down the road, to 2022 and possibly early 2023. So prospect of trade surplus, I think, is very dim at this moment.
A survey of analysts by the Federation of Korean Industries also says the country's trade deficit is expected to hit roughly $28 billion, the highest since the figure was first compiled in 1956. 엄지영, Arirang News.
The Asian Development Bank cut next year's growth outlook for the South Korean economy to 2.3%, citing global slowdown. The latest revision is 0.3 percentage point lower than its July projection. For 2022, the organization maintained its forecast of 2.6%, the same as South Korea's central bank. The inflation estimate for this year was unchanged at 4.5%, for next year 3%. As for the region more broadly, the ADB slashed average growth outlook for 46 developing countries from 4.6% to 4.3%, citing risks from aggressive monetary tightening by major economies and China's downturn. Back here in the nation, the National Assembly's interpellation session continues with a focus on the economy. Lawmakers put energy source issues along with corporate tax cuts on the list of questions for key officials. Kim Bo-young brings the highlights from Wednesday.
Day 3 of the National Assembly's interpellation session took place on Wednesday. The main focus was the economy, with lawmakers grilling public officials such as Prime Minister Han Duk-soo and Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho. One issue was the revision to the power supply plan, raising the proportion of nuclear power generation while lowering the share of renewable energy. Lawmakers expressed concerns over the Yoon administration neglecting the significance of renewable energy sources. The Prime Minister said the energy mix is more practical and that the administration acknowledges the importance of renewable energy.
Not just the nationally determined contributions. We believe the energy mix should be both renewable and nuclear. The government is not giving up on renewable energy sources. They need to go together.
The Yoon administration, too, is upping the share of renewable energy sources. What we need to mull over is how to do that in the most cost-efficient way, minimizing the financial burden for the Korea Electric Power Corporation.
There was fierce criticism over the expected fallout from the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS and Science Act, and the Biden administration's biomanufacturing initiative. Lawmakers called on officials to keep a close eye on proposed bills in the U.S. that could affect South Korea's strategic industries. The government's push for cutting corporate tax was also heavily criticized, calling it a tax cut for the rich. But officials pointed out that it is a global trend and is aimed at encouraging foreign firms to enter the South Korean market.
Most OECD countries have been lowering their corporate tax, and South Korea too has been continuously lowering it since the Kim Dae-jung administration, the previous government being the exception.
Both Chu and Han added that regulatory reforms would create a trickle-down effect with more jobs and investment. For Thursday's session, focusing on education, social issues, and culture, the main opposition DP and the ruling party are expected to keep clashing over hotly debated issues, such as the Yellow Envelope Bill, which could prevent companies from filing lawsuits against labor unions for any financial losses while on strike. Kim Bo-young, Arirang News.
The newly elected floor leader of the ruling People Power Party emphasized the importance of bipartisan cooperation in Parliament to ensure the government can carry out its #1 objective, improving people's lives. In a meeting with his counterpart of the main opposition bloc, Chu Ho-young pointed out there's nothing the National Assembly can do without support from the DP, which holds the majority. He also highlighted the need to uphold parliamentary democracy and refrain from using reprehensible criticisms. The DP's floor leader echoed the sentiment, saying the two sides are partners working toward the same goal. Chu also called on the National Assembly Speaker Kim Jin-pyo to play an active role as mediator. The defense chiefs of South Korea and Slovakia signed an MOU to lay the groundwork for bilateral cooperation. According to a Defense Ministry press release, Lee Jong-sup and Yaroslav Nad had agreed to expand the partnership to include non-traditional areas such as cybersecurity and climate change. Another MOU on defense, logistics, and industry could be finalized at a later date. The visiting official promised to support denuclearization efforts. The ministers agreed Russia's invasion of Ukraine is a clear violation of international law and exchanged ideas on ways to help Ukraine recover its territory and sovereignty. Elsewhere around the world, President Vladimir Putin announced a partial military mobilization following a backlash from Western countries for the Kremlin's attempt to annex regions in Ukraine. So far, 4 areas under Russian military control announced plans for urgent referendums on joining Russia. Kim Jong-sil has the latest.
The Russian leader said on Wednesday that he has signed a decree ordering a partial military mobilization due to start on Wednesday.
to protect our motherland, its sovereignty and territorial integrity, to ensure the security of our nation and people in the liberated territories. I consider it necessary to support the proposals of the Defense Ministry and the General Staff to conduct a partial mobilization in Russia.
He also said the West is trying to destroy Russia and that Russia is prepared to use all its resources in its defense. Putin's address comes a day after 4 regions in Ukraine under Russian control announced plans to hold referendums on joining Russia. The eastern and southern Ukrainian regions that will take part in the referendum are Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. Russia annexed Crimea in 2014 in a similar manner, despite drawing international condemnation back then as well. The White House strongly condemned the move.
Let me be clear. If this does transpire, and obviously it's not a done deal yet, but if this does transpire, the United States will never recognize Russia's claims to any purportedly annexed parts of Ukraine. And we will never recognize this territory as anything other than a part of Ukraine.
Other countries such as France and Germany also condemned the scheduled vote. French President Emmanuel Macron told reporters on Tuesday that the referendum result will not be recognized by the international community. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said, quote, "These sham referendums cannot be accepted." The referendum for the 4 regions will be held from Friday until next week. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
Shifting gears to a different story now. Gochujang, an essential ingredient that helps a dish define itself as being Korean. Thanks to a recent project, a new way to make the traditional red chili pepper paste has been developed. One of the benefits include preventing diabetes and obesity. Cho Sang-min has the full story.
This farm is renowned for producing high-quality chili peppers in South Korea. It sits 700 meters above sea level and gets the perfect amount of heat and rain and uses clean water to grow the vegetable every year. The bright green peppers are not just different in terms of how they look, but they come with certain health benefits that other peppers don't. Commonly referred to as tangjo, which in Korean is short for controlling blood sugar, the peppers can prevent blood glucose levels from rising compared to other kinds. The peppers can help prevent diabetes and weight gain.
They not only taste and smell good, but also fully packed inside. Their yields are increasing almost 20% more than the ones produced elsewhere.
Using these chilies, they have also come up with a new type of gochujang, Korean red pepper paste. It's also healthier than other products found in stores as it contains up to 40% less carbohydrates. In addition, it uses low-calorie natural sweeteners and not corn syrup and sugar, and has fewer calories and is low in sugar and salt content.
The ones already out in the market contain too much sugar, so not everyone is free to consume them. But because our product allows people to enjoy the spicy taste without worrying about sugar levels, they really like it.
Having jointly developed the technology to produce the chili paste, the Rural Development Administration and the Korea Agricultural Technology Promotion Agency registered the technology for patent and have started commercializing it.
We plan on supporting projects to make health supplements. We will also expand support to bolster not only its domestic consumption, but also overseas as well.
This new type of gochujang is expected to allow people to enjoy spicy food in a healthier way. Cho Sang-min, Arirang News.
As temperatures took a steep fall, the season's first frost has been observed at Seoraksan Mountain today. This frost is believed to be the earliest of the season since the year 2000. And tomorrow will be another day with wide temperature gaps. Most regions will see a difference of 10 degrees or more between day and night. Places like Daegwallyeong and Gangwon-do province will see lows dropping to single figures, but the daytime will get quickly warm. Drastic fluctuation in temperatures can make our bodies more vulnerable to illnesses, so please take extra precautions. Expect strong UV rays tomorrow nationwide. Keep in mind that the peak hours for sun exposure are between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. And for those across the East Coast and on Jeju Island, continue to stay away from the shorelines. High waves and gusty winds are in the forecast. Morning lows in Seoul and Gwangju will be starting off at 15 degrees. Daily highs in Seoul and Chuncheon will be reaching 24. Daegu and Gyeongju will be topping out at 25 degrees. On Friday, light showers are in the forecast for central regions, including here in Seoul. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That's all from us. As always, thank you for watching.
A global network representing Korea. Arirang TV. Introducing the unique charm of Korea to the world. Telling stories from